Okay, but
And we're back.
So we're back.
We're back at Root Source with Rabbi Dov ben Shor, sitting with him in his private study hall in the community of Ma'alei Hever in the
Semi-private.
Semi-private. It's personal. It's certainly not personal.
It's
open
mine.
to everyone.
It's open to everybody, but
Yes.
it's my
Yes,
I put it together.
We've been talking about the Sanhedrin, and we're back with Rabbi Ben Shor asking a little bit more about this Sanhedrin, a fascinating development in our modern times. The Sanhedrin that you discussed today, how many members does it have?
It depends on what you mean by how many members, of course. Just like any good question, a Jew has to give you more than one answer. Let me back up. The Sanhedrin technically represents all of Israel, and any rabbi is welcome to come and sit. There's a steering committee or a small committee that sits every week, mostly every week, right? That works every week. There are other times when we have conferences where larger groups show up and larger people, and especially more bigger rabbis, or more respected rabbis, or more well-known rabbis tend to show up at those larger conferences. Those that show up every week tend to be about 23.
Wow.
Let's say, okay.
But ultimately,
There's about 250, I think. You have to talk to Rav Dov, who's the secretary.
Yes.
He knows how many people have received smicha, the ordination from the Sanhedrin. The way it worked.
Yes.
First, before the Sanhedrin, even this rudimentary form of the Sanhedrin, the Nassian Sanhedrin existed, there was a committee to try and get a Sanhedrin to exist. And they spent years working on this. This was even before I was involved. I was involved because I have normal ordination from the Rabbanut, and I'm a judge Dayanut from the Rabbanut, and so therefore I'm on a list, which they sent to everybody a list. There were several candidates who can be the first ordained person. I'll on one foot tell you that the determination is based on the Rambam. How do you restart
the terminology?
How do you restart the termination based on the Rambam? Is how do you restart the Sanhedrin?
Yes.
How do you restart it? Because it's been dormant, let's say, for 1,000 years. It existed after the destruction, but 1,000 years, let's say. There's different debates about that, but we'll leave that to the side. So how do you restart it? The Rambam has a formula where she basically says if all the rabbis in the land of Israel agree on someone to be the first ordained rabbi, he's the ordained rabbi, and then he can ordain others. They tried to do this. Some suggest they succeeded, some didn't at the time of...
Yes.
I'm about to tell you.
Yes.
Rabbi Joseph Karo, the Shulchan Aruch. At the time of him, Rabbi Abuhav.
Which about when was that?
That was about 500 years ago, right about 30, 40 years after the expulsion from Spain. Okay? So 52.
Okay.
So, according to the Hebrew calendar. So they tried to do that then, but there was a rabbi in Jerusalem that objected. The chief rabbi of Jerusalem objected, but it's a whole complicated history. You can go check out the history. I'm sure it's on Google somewhere. And probably 3 or 4 different versions of it. Some of them might be true, or alternative facts, depending on how you want to look at it. In our era, what happened was there was several candidates. I forgot who the first one was, but he refused himself. Rav Halberstein of Eidat Haridit was letters were sent to everybody that's on the list of judges and in the list of rabbis, community rabbis, and things like this. Who they thought would be the best Smuch Rishon, and there was a small list, a short list. It basically came to Rav Halberstein of Eidat Haridit. There was more to it than that, but we'll leave it at that. Rav Halberstein accepted the idea. Now, aside from all the the way it works now, we used some. I wasn't part of it at the time, but still we use some interesting legal loopholes here, and this is clearly after the fact, b'diavad of b'diavad in Hebrew literature, like after the fact it fits. But a lot of people didn't respond. most rabbis said, hey, Sanhedrin. All right, yeah, come on, you joke. Okay, now, but there's a principle in Jewish law that one that doesn't vote, one that abstains, it doesn't count against, right? So you only count the votes for. Now, so no one voted against Rav Halberstein, and then Rav Adin or Rav Adin, Tzvi Adin, and Dov Lebanoni, who were the two biggest movers of this entire thing. Tzvi Adin was part of the Rav Kaduri's Beit Din, and Rav Dov Lebanoni is a big Chabad dayan at some point. He's now an elderly, very elderly man, sweetheart of a man. But we have all their testimony. You can go to the Sanhedrin website on video and everything like that. But anyhow, they went to the really big rabbis, like Chamovadi Yosef, Hamor Kaliyahu, Harav Shapira, and Rav Elverstein. And they asked personally if Rav Halberstein is fit to be the first anointed rabbi. Okay? All four of them, those are the four big ones. They went to other Hasidic rabbis.
Yes.
I'm not going to list all of them.
Okay.
All of them either said, Ra'ui v'Ra'ui. Chamovadia said Ra'ui v'Ra'ui. He's fit, and so did Rav Elberstein said that. Other rabbis said, I'm abstaining, I'm not giving voice, meaning...
But they said that.
And they said that, meaning they knew exactly they knew what they were saying when they said that.
Right.
They weren't saying for, but they weren't saying against, because they might have... Hamor Kaliyahu, for instance, was this, but his son, Rav Shmuel Eliyahu, is an anointed member of the Sanhedrin. Okay? So Rav Mordechai Eliyahu said, I'm not voting. Okay, because of his own understanding of the process of redemption. Anyway, so he was accepted as the Samuch HaRishon, as the first
Rabbi Halberstam
of Edat Haredit, and he, though later withdrawn from active support, he never repudiated his ordination, even though he was under a lot of pressure do from the Haredi community and his children and a lot of other things. He said, I do not repudiate. But he immediately anointed as rabbis Rav Dov Lebanoni and Rav Tzvi Edan, who then took the ball and ran with it, and Rav Tzvi Edan was the first Nasi, first president of Sanhedrin, temporary president, until Rav Steinsaltz, who also is no longer active for personal reasons mainly.
So in other words, that first Rabbi Halberstam, once he was ordained, then he could ordain anybody, and those people The
custom is you only ordain with 3 judges, but since the first one can't ordain with 3 judges, he ordains 2 others, and then the 3 of them ordained.
Those 2, Rabbi Edan and Rabbi Lebanoni, who were obviously very active in this initiative.
Right, along with Rav Dov Stein and Rav Yishai Bavad of Beit El, and Beit El Tefillin, if you are familiar, and
so they probably, so Rabbi Lebanoni and Rabbi Eden also made sure to ordain others.
What happened then was there was a conference in Tiberia.
At which point, before they had ordained anyone?
I'm not exactly sure if they didn't ordain anyone. There may have been a small group, but that they organized a conference, which is where I came in, where I was invited, and a lot of other, Rav Yaakov Peretz,
many,
Rav Shmuel
dozens
Eliyahu,
of rabbis.
Hundreds of rabbis
were invited.
Hundreds of rabbis were invited. There was over 70 rabbis there, for sure. From all sorts, Yemenite, Ashkenazi, Hasidic.
The goal of that conference was?
To establish a Sanhedrin, to choose a Nasi, and to get the ball rolling. To say in Tiberia. Wow. Now,
this was about when?
12 years ago.
That's all.
12 years ago.
Okay.
I don't know. My memory of time is
about 2005.
The older I get,
so. We'll check it out on Google.
Yeah, my memory of time is.
Okay, so you attended this event. You attended this conference in Tiberias,
along with a lot of other people,
with over 70.
And there we were ordained. Rav Yaakov, a lot of people. Rav Dov Lior was ordained,
and he was there.
Was he there or not? He definitely came to subsequent ones. I'm not sure if he was there. There were other conferences.
Let's move forward.
Rav Dov Lior was part of it, and he is definitely
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Was the chief rabbi of Israel invited? Was the chief rabbi of Jerusalem and you know the top?
Invited for sure. Okay. Invited for sure. They did not come, though there are some rabbis in official positions that do are Rav Toledano, Rav Yaakov Peretz is a rabbi of Neve Yaakov neighborhood. There are some rabbis, but there are political issues. The chief rabbi, basically, if he were to come, would basically be repudiating his authority as chief rabbi, because he would no longer be then
The chief rabbi.
If he recognized the Sanhedrin as the official Sanhedrin, he wouldn't be the chief rabbi, right? Now, that may be the right thing to do, but that's not always the easy or the most. There's a lot of. Hamovadia Yosef did not come, but I went to him and asked him when I got the invitation if I should go. Hamovadia Yosef. I went and asked him if I should go. He said, "Yes, you should go. You should. It's a worthy thing." Okay. It wasn't quite what he said, but paraphrasing to my favor. He definitely didn't for me to go. He told me I could go.
You said that Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu's son, Rabbi Shmuel Eliyahu, is a member of the Sanhedrin.
Obviously,
And he was, if I'm not mistaken, the losing candidate for chief rabbi in this past election, which was held a couple of years ago. So he probably was almost elected. He could have been elected the chief rabbi of Israel, and then he would either continue to promote the Sanhedrin or maybe change his spots after.
We don't know. I don't know. He's politics is.
But today, when the Sanhedrin sits, I like to call it the nascent Sanhedrin, to clarify that we're talking about the Sanhedrin of today as opposed to Sanhedrin of 2,000 years ago.
Well, also because it is not in. First of all, there's two levels of a Sanhedrin. Even if all the great rabbis were sitting, if everybody was sitting, unless we're sitting in the Shkat Gazit, in the chamber of hewn stone, the Sanhedrin's power and authority, more importantly, power is who has the guns, but authority is diminished until they sit there. They're not allowed to do certain things unless we're sitting there, because in that place, when the temple, the question is the temple has to be standing or not, but in that place, not necessarily, but in that place is where the Shekhinah rests, the God's presence rests, and therefore we can assume that they will also be aided on a much higher spiritual level, and it won't be petty politics as usual. I mean, not that we don't, that the Shekhinah rests, the God's presence rests when any two Jews sit and talk, as we say. However, there's a higher level of His presence and a more Ruach HaKodesh, Holy Spirit.
So you hinted that, as we mentioned before, one of the duties of the Sanhedrin will be to crown the Messiah. And you also hinted now, if I understood you correctly, that the Sanhedrin only reaches its supreme level, its highest level, when it sits in the courtyard of the hewn stone. The how did we say it? The office,
chamber of
hewn stone in the temple. But now, if I understood you correctly, it's not necessarily in the that chamber in the built temple, but even if it's only in the place on the Temple Mount.
For instance, Rav Yisrael Ariel took us there, and we sat there.
Wow.
At one point, and made some, I forgot what decision we made there, but we did something, or in the place where they think it might have been, or close to the place where it was supposed to be.
So some people might say that you are, the current Sanhedrin already is up to that level because they have sat in that spot.
Only the Sanhedrin, while sitting in there making decisions at that time, works. Okay. And even a Sanhedrin that had sat there while we're out, there's only that's not the inyan of a king. The idea of a king doesn't involve the Lishkat. The Lishkat Gazis basically means we're allowed to execute people according to the Torah. No, the power of execution. No, but the power, that's the main thing. And also a rabbi, the rebel rabbi. A rabbi that rebels is also executed, but we're not allowed to even judge him as a rebel.
So again, from what's fascinating to us, I think, is the Messiah. And you're saying that it may or may not be required that the temple be built before the Messiah is coronated.
Well, clearly, from most of the sources, the Sanhedrin has to exist before the Messiah. Some sources do suggest that the temple would be built before the Messiah is recognized.
Right.
The question is whether it's recognized or exists, because also there are those that say that the Messiah will build the temple.
Okay.
So the question, you can smooth the positions by saying, well, he'll build it and then we'll recognize that he's the Mashiach, right?
So in other words, we're not sure exactly what's going to be until it happens.
Well, which is exactly what the Rambam says, right? We'll know it when it happens. Okay, hopefully we'll recognize it when it happens. That's one of our biggest problems in this generation, is recognizing the unfolding and the fulfillment of the prophecies that are existing in the Torah, in the Tanakh, right? In the entire Bible. One of our biggest problems is recognizing them, and it's important that we recognize them, because according to Ibn Ezra, at least, and many others, those prophecies aren't just to say, oh, look, he predicted correctly, or yay, he's Nostradamus, right? It's to say, oh, A, B, now we have to do C. In other words, we have to do. It's when you see A and B, you now have to do C. When you see when these things happen, you have to do. It's not there is the Jewish concept, the Torah concept of serving God doesn't involve sitting back and waiting for everything to fall from heaven. Mm-hmm. Okay. Nothing gets done unless we do it. God didn't create us to be puppets. He created us to be active partners. Not that he needs us to be active partners. God didn't need to create anything, right? It's God. But he created us to be active partners, and therefore we have an obligation to fulfill our role. Just like the Ramchal talks about the temple. We're talking about the temple, right? There's an idea to build the physical temple. Okay. We build it. Rashi says the temple will fall from the heavens. Mm-hmm. The Ramchal explains what Rashi means. Rashi means, it's very clear. Just like a man and a wife need to meet and have a conversation, okay, before they can have a baby. And then the soul of the child on the 40th day, according to our tradition, comes into the body that they created with their chromosomes and their hormones and all their other things, right? We build the temple, and then the soul of the temple, the inner aspect of that temple, the temple on high, Mishkan Elyon, right, will fall into the temple. This didn't happen during the Second Temple period. Wow. That's what the Ramchal says, and this is what the rabbis hint at when they say there were 5 things that weren't in the Second Temple that were in the First Temple. One of them being the divine presence, which is a pretty big thing.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Okay, didn't come in, and so they're supposed to. So we, if me and my wife want to have a child, if she's sitting over there and I'm sitting over here and we're praying to God. Not that praying's not important. It's key. Before, after, before and after, right? It's key, right? However, if we don't have a conversation
nothing's going to happen.
To use gentle language, right? Nothing's going to happen no matter how pious I am, no matter how pious my wife is, right? There is no such thing from our perspective of immaculate conception.
Yes. Bob, did you have a question to ask, to add here?